It was really not until 1949 that people with epilepsy were permitted to drive.
As more medications were developed and people had better prognoses who have epilepsy, states realized that they could be licensed safely.
Today, all states permit people with epilepsy, if their seizures are well controlled, to drive automobiles.
Thousands of people with epilepsy drive responsibly and safely on our nation's roads. Most people with epilepsy can get a driver's license if they meet their state's requirements and are seizure-free.
Fortunately, many of my patients with epilepsy are able to drive. They're able to drive because their seizures can be well controlled through medication and other treatment.
Driving is just as important to a person with a seizure disorder as it is for anyone else.
Being able to drive yourself there is a totally different feeling than having to depend on somebody else. It's a sense of freedom that you're able to go out on your own, but when you have to depend on your friend, it makes you feel like a little kid.
If you're way out in the suburbs with no means of transportation for yourself, public or otherwise, you're stuck, and that can hold you back.
I was very dependent on my friends, my family, and anybody that would give me a ride anywhere. So I felt rather powerless and helpless.
But as important as driving is to people with epilepsy, other things also influence the decision to drive.
Because it's not just about you and your convenience or your ability to get even back and forth to your job or whatever. It's also, are you putting other people at risk?
After many years of trying to get her seizures under control, Renee Woodard is now seizure-free and has her driver's license.
When I was having seizures, they affected my driving a great deal. At one point, I would not drive. Then when I felt that I was doing okay, I would drive. I managed to total 2 cars because I chose to drive when I thought I could drive. Driving was very important to me, but I had to recognize that lives were important to me.
Today, Renee Woodard is a counselor at the local Epilepsy Foundation, where driving is a frequent topic for discussion.
How are things going for you?
Well, most of the time they go pretty good, but I'm still having problems handling the not driving. I get very frustrated at not being able to pick up and go when I want to.
Deani Finkbeiner also knows what it means to wait for seizure control.
I was a teenager. Nothing could touch me. Nothing could be wrong with me. I didn't want to have anything wrong with me. I had to go to college and I had to have a life. It took 5 years of this medication to finally find the balance and to change to different medications. I didn't get a license till I was 26, but because I was so poor, I never got a car. And it wasn't until I got married that I married my husband for his car.
How long you have to stay seizure-free before you can qualify for a license depends on the state you live in.
Some states will require a person to be seizure-free for 3 months, and others will use 6 months, and others use a year. But they will make exceptions for someone who has seizures only during sleep or who has seizures that don't impair consciousness or affect their ability to drive.
A few states require doctors to report to the motor vehicle department when someone is diagnosed with a seizure disorder. In the other states, it's up to the driver to report himself. To find out the regulations in your state, contact the State Department of Motor Vehicles.
And then the state will tell the individual what they require, and usually there are various medical forms that have to be filled out, and it's the individual who has to get that information from the doctor.
Because in most states you are required to have a letter from your doctor stating how long you've been seizure-free, there's a common misconception that physicians are responsible for deciding who can or cannot drive. But it's the state that issues driver's licenses and decides who drives, not doctors.
It is, however, the physician's responsibility to inform the patient that driving with a seizure disorder is a risk, and that the patient should inform the state authorities, generally the Motor Vehicle Administration, that they have epilepsy.
If someone's license has been unfairly denied, there's an appeal process in every state. It usually involves an administrative hearing. The time waiting to get a license can be tough on people.
They sometimes feel cheated because they're told that they cannot drive. And sometimes, as much as we want to do things, it's oftentimes best not to do things. Even if it's for a temporary period of time, sometimes it's good not to do those things and be optimistic and pretty much look down the road and say, I can't drive now, but pretty soon my seizures will be controlled. I'm going to work with the doctors. We're going to work together, and eventually, perhaps I can drive again.
Legal department.
Attorney Cynthia Lehman says people run legal
When did
risks
you have
if they
the
drive
seizure?
before their seizures are controlled.
All right, let me just
She
check that
advises
one second.
people to follow the Department of Motor Vehicles rules carefully.
Yeah. Our information shows that your state uses a 6-month seizure-free period, and so you would need to not drive for 6 months until they clear you to drive. If they
Have
drive
you talked
without
to your
being
doctor at
cleared
this
by the
point
DMV
about
to
driving?
drive and they have an accident, they're more likely to face liability, either in the form of criminal liability or civil liability if someone sues them.
Some people are so afraid of losing their licenses that they may not tell their doctor when they've had a seizure.
This creates problems because if a physician doesn't know that a patient is having seizures, they cannot adjust their medication properly so that their seizures can be controlled. Joe, hi, it's good seeing you again.
Good seeing you.
How's everything going?
Fine, fine. How are
Though
you?
his epilepsy had been controlled for years, Joe Braswell had a breakthrough seizure while driving.
That was really devastating. The first thing that happened was that my license was revoked. I was enraged about it because I knew I couldn't drive for at least a period of 3 months or more.
And it seems that things worked out all right for you. You've got your license back now?
I had to contact the Motor Vehicle Board, and I had to go in to see them, and they said that I could drive again.
While he waited to get his license back, Joe relied on family, friends, and public transportation.
By not driving, it made me look at things a lot different, and it made me think about how great a privilege it is to really drive.
Having a license depends first on being seizure-free, and then doing everything you can to stay that way. Several things can make having a seizure more likely, but there are ways to avoid them.
One is to comply carefully with medical treatment. One of the major causes for an individual to have breakthrough or unexpected seizures is an error or a failure to take medications properly.
To show that you're capable of taking care of yourself, that you're able to take your medication without anybody nagging you.
For me, compliance
I'm okay.
goes further. It's not just about what the doctor
No seizures?
orders. It's being true to yourself. It's compliance with my needs and what I know I need to do in order to take care of myself, like get enough sleep.
Alcohol use may sometimes precipitate seizures. Some individuals are particularly prone or sensitive to alcohol, and those individuals need to be aware of that and its potential risk for them if they're drivers.
Sometimes, in spite of everything, seizures can still occur. Some people can sense when a seizure is about to begin.
If a person with epilepsy is driving an automobile and feels a warning or a sensation that a seizure may be starting, that person should pull off to the side of the road and stop driving.
For some people with epilepsy, seizures continue, so driving is not an option. Michael Coyle has come to accept the disappointment of not being able to drive.
When I realized I could not get a driver's license, I was very bitter about it at first. But then I sat down, thought about it, and I figured, well, what's the sense of it? Of getting so bitter about it? It isn't going to accomplish anything. If I need to get somewhere, there's friends, there's family, there's a city bus, there's taxis, there's bicycles, and the last option, no matter how far or close it is, If you have 2 feet, put them to good use.
It takes persistence and patience for someone who doesn't drive. Alternatives are available, but not always easy to find.
Getting around in a rural area is the real challenge. And so the best thing that they can do is to contact their local epilepsy association, or if there isn't an association in their area, to call some local organization or their chamber of commerce or whatever to find out where to go to find out about a service that could transport them to where they need to go.
I think the hardest part about asking for help is that it is public acknowledgement of I'm unable to do this thing for myself, and will you help me? And that's part of letting go of the denial and accepting this is true, this is my truth. I'm unable to do this for myself.
If you have to depend on your friends, you know, I have to learn to deal with that, and I've dealt with that pretty well.
Driving is very important to us, and I think it's particularly important to young people. In my patients, I try to encourage them that they definitely have a potential to drive in the future, that in time there's a good chance, if their seizures are not already controlled, that we will be able to help them with their seizures and obtain full control of their seizures. Once their seizures are controlled, they can become safe drivers.
When you have a seizure disorder, you have to think about your responsibility to yourself and to others on the road, and be very honest with yourself first, and then of course with your physician, so that you do view driving as a privilege for which you have to be responsible.